As I said before, of course, if you have any questions, feel free to raise them. Um, because we're coming from a Christian context, if anything you've experienced in that setting you want to bring up as part of this discussion, please do, because that is part of what needs to be destroyed, is what was built up in that type of experience. Um, so, I wanted to talk about, as I said before, what religion is and where it comes from spiritually, and how the phenomenon of religion differs from what spirituality is. So, when someone like Yeshua, aka Jesus, was teaching, he obviously was not teaching from a book, although he was referring back to the books that were present and known at the time. But my point is, you have the ability to draw from your own interface with this reality and its source, and from that interface and from your ability to draw from it, you can speak without needing to read anything. You can know the law, capital L, without having read the Torah, in the case of millennia ago in the Middle East. And that is because everything that this reality contains is contained within you as a product of this reality. So spirituality is your ability to interface with and read from your own connection to the source of all that is, and your own connection to everything that is. So I say that Yeshua didn't need to read books. He just spoke because he spoke from his own connection. Everything that is written in every religious text everywhere is an attempt to describe or reinterpret something that is drawn from your direct connection. So when you learn how to draw from that in yourself, you can begin to understand what's in the book, because the book is there to help you reconnect to what is in you. And as long as you don't reconnect, or as long as it remains words on a page that you believe you need to follow literally, that allows for what religion is to exist. As long as spirituality is not reawakened in the individual in that setting.
And you're talking about the Bible, right?
Yes.
I don't like reading it.
Mm.
Now, I know if I said it in that setting, I'm just gone, but yeah, blasphemy. But
okay.
Huh.
It's okay.
It's recording me.
I know.
Yeah, it's fine. Anyway.
I just don't, and for some reason, it's not connect. I don't connect with the words that are on the page. I don't like reading it, and I tried, but it's not connecting.
Mm. And that is very likely because where we are now in terms of our understanding and in terms of the types of energy that is making up our collective experience is that type of study in the old way it's going to be more difficult because that is no longer necessary. What is necessary is that we learn how to draw from the reality of what we experience intuitively and through any exercise that allows us to increase our connection, so to speak. Something like meditation will be more helpful to you and all of us than, more often than not, attempting to extract truth from the words on a page. Now, of course, these books, like the Bible and anything else, are still useful. But the primary source that you draw from is within you. That is always the source of the real teaching. And this is an attempt to remind you of the thing that is in you. So, true spirituality requires no laws that are imposed on you from without. All beings have within them an awareness of the balance of the true law, capital L, that is found in nature. And nature itself is a physical extension of our ultimate spiritual source. So when I write, whenever I write on my blog or whatever, I like to capitalize words in the middle of the sentence in order to indicate the actual direct experiential quality of what is being talked about. And in this case, when I say natural law, I'm referring to your own ability to be in balance with yourself and with your surroundings, and your own ability to perceive what constitutes balance and harmony in yourself and your surroundings. What religion is many things, but a lot of it is an attempt to recreate law, but without a sense of the spiritual source of true law. So it's an attempt to recreate a system that is not based in our ability to draw from what is real. Rather, it is an attempt to create a system based within the context of our ignorance of what is real. So within the context of spiritual ignorance, religion arises. At first, it may be an attempt to bring order to what it perceives as chaos, but as long as it remains disconnected from spirituality, it becomes chaos. And I'll get into that more, but
I mean, I can see that because basically what you're describing in terms of that book, when people try to live by that book without really experiencing what is the true nature of the law, that's where they go seriously wrong, because they think the literal meaning of the book is it, as opposed to what's in here.
and yep, that's why in all religious settings it becomes a competition to see who can be the most Christian or the most whatever.
And the other thing is that each religion then sets boundaries for us by how they interpret that which is in the book in an organized religious fashion rather than each individual experiencing it from their own reality. And so the more boundaries they set, then you have the creeds that go with that and all of the other stuff. So that's part of building that false kind of precept around what the truth really is. And it almost, it milks the truth away from, it's almost like it's very little truth in the truth. Because it's defined by a man trying to corral other men into believing what they believe.
Yeah, I can see how people will really get deceived if they're following some man who's supposedly following that book, as opposed to finding out what's true and what's the truth inside of them.
But if you look at the thing that we don't really see, it distinguishes all religion without us really thinking about it. Everyone becomes judgmental. All religions are judgmental because you're constantly judging people based upon what you do as opposed to what they don't do. So if regardless of what you call it, doesn't matter whether it's Islam or whether it's your everyday life, if you're judgmental, then you are exercising the same principles that make religions function. Judgment. I'm better than you because of the religion I'm a part of, as opposed to just living life based upon the truth. But all good lies have some truth.
So I mentioned the law, and I mentioned that nature is the physical extension of our ultimate spiritual source. Whenever a blockage is introduced, or whenever we encounter a blockage, by which I mean something that distracts us from our ability to draw from our own connection, or our ability to maintain an awareness of our connection, and what we have the ability to draw from that awareness. This disrupts the natural flow and the natural intuitive communication between our own spiritual source and its physical expression, this physical environment and us. Hey. In the confusion that is created as a result of this disruption, when we encounter a particular distraction or blockage. Hello, telephone people. In the confusion that is created as a result of this disruption, there is a potential to misidentify our true source and our actual and real connection to that source with one of our own creation. And so when a vacuum is created due to ultimately our own ignorance, something has the ability to step into that vacuum and either take advantage of us, or we have the ability to shoot ourselves in the foot spiritually. So religion is a product of both of those things. It is both the result of our own attempts to correct or remove this blockage that we feel has become in between us and our own spiritual connection to our Creator and everything else, as well as other things who sense that ignorance, other people, energies, forces, whatever. It doesn't have to be anything concrete at this point. Other things that sense that confusion and step in and attempt to use it to their advantage. So we allow for the development of what religion is, and are also subject to those forces that want to keep that in place, even if we don't realize that they are there. I'll explain as we go, but does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, the basic explanation for what religion is, as we see it expressed today, is, as I just mentioned, it is a confused attempt to rebuild our connection to that infinite source of all awareness, all dimensions, all densities, all universes, etc., that cannot ultimately be described with name. That being which is called Creator, or by any other name, doesn't matter.
Okay, you gotta say that again. Religion is a confused attempt to connect with.
It is a confused attempt to rebuild our connection to that infinite source of awareness and all things. So that's the sort of basic concept of how religion is allowed to arise in the first place, in the context of spiritual confusion and ignorance. But how this sort of plays out through time incorporates many more aspects of the true nature of this reality in terms of how these simple principles like, okay, we became a bit less aware of who we are, how that plays out over time and through history is more complicated. It has many implications, and it involves much more of the sort of metaphysical and more esoteric understanding of what this reality is and events that have occurred throughout history and stuff like that, some of which I'll get into. But these same concepts apply to all religious settings. It doesn't matter where in the world a particular religion arises, these same concepts apply to it. So religion, as I've heard it said, is this sort of quintessential product of religious thinking. And what that is something that I'm going to get into. But it doesn't necessarily have to apply to religion. It applies to many more aspects of our experience than we might realize.
So, it's the same thing as a man thinketh, so is he. And so if we think about religion in all these other ways, then we create what it is we think about. All of this confused thought manifests into this religion or this religion or this whatever.
Yes. And you could, part of that is spirit is sort of filtered through the lens of personality and culture as well. And so a particular religion as it develops in one part of the world versus another is different, but the concepts involved and the spiritual events that have taken place to allow that to arise are very similar. But as I said, it doesn't necessarily apply to religion. Anything that becomes to you something that you think you need to live, that becomes the thing that you worship.
Well, I can see that in terms of these people who are so true to the Confederacy, and it's their heritage and whatever. It's kind of like a religion.
It's very much a religion. These so-called conservatives in Congress who are nothing like the real conservatives, the neocon people who worship corporate conservatism or whatever, that is very much a religion that plays out in politics. But their belief structure is not built on Christianity like they all say it is. I'm pretty sure Jesus said, give your money away. Find me one of them who does that. But see, it doesn't matter what you think. It doesn't matter what you say you believe or whatever. What you do is what reveals who you are. There are all kinds of religious ways in which we think that then play out physically, politically in society, in the institution of religion, like Christianity or whatever. But the source of that is a way of thinking. It is a mindset. It is spiritual ignorance as a result of a blockage within us that we have not yet dealt with or don't want to deal with.
But do we by virtue of our belief and desires constantly create religions even though we don't label them as religion? The whole Trump movement, religion, they're very submissive to him. They're looking for him to deliver them. They're looking for him to make things better for them, a better life. You know, so even though it's not labeled as a religion, it's very much a religion, which means that whatever we submit to is what we submit to is what identifies our religion, if we submit to that.
Unfortunate thing is that in identifying with the Trump religion, when we miss the big picture, I want Trump to do what I need him to do for me. The important thing is, how does it impact other people too? And that's what people are not seeing. Even religion has its built-in selfishness.
And that's Christianity.
Yeah.
That's Christianity.
Christianity has its built-in selfishness, yes.
And Christianity is whatever it needs to be at any given moment. You know, you can't tell me that Christianity is predicated upon what's true in the scriptures, yet it justifies everything that's going on right now. In terms of, for example, one of the things in this whole tax proposal is to take away the head of the household for single parent. You know, these kinds of things, but Christians support them. Christians support anything that supports their culture, their Southern culture. The Confederacy is the Christian movement. Trumpism is the Christian movement. You see where I'm coming from? The whole idea of take our country back is recreate the Southern culture, which is a religious movement. it has nothing to do with anything that, and I do this, when I say Southern culture, I'm not talking about geographics as much as I'm talking about conception. Okay?
Yeah.
It's not just beneath it, it's a
Right.
Very much so. So, unless you or I, unless we are willing to face the fear of giving up what we believe to be true and what you think is true, we will never know who we are or who this being that we call Creator is. And this is especially true of those beliefs concerning who or what this being called Creator is. So, I don't mean to drop everything that you know because it's automatically not true, no. Rather, don't religiously cling to a particular understanding when your own experience has evolved you beyond that understanding. So, when you seek to know your own self, you will always encounter things that will put you in a very uncomfortable position of having to examine things that you thought were true. And that is a good thing. And I remember when I was beginning to learn all this stuff and start speaking here, occasionally I would come across something that would make me question everything I thought I understood and I thought I believed. And I learned over time to embrace that, because that was always a prompt to greater levels of understanding. Because I am not here, and none of us are here, to reinforce something we already know. Rather, we are here to seek truth. And if indeed all this is real, then if we seek reality, we should find it. And if we seek truth in what is real, it should be there. And it is. But it is an uncomfortable process of letting go of all the religious thinking that we have allowed to live in ourselves, even unknowingly. So, all of the so-called world religions were founded upon the spiritual principles of conscious awareness. In other words, they were all founded on the ability to know yourself as a non-physical being and being able to draw from your experience as a non-physical, non-material being. Spirit, of course, is your direct interface with reality, and its ultimate source, which you are also a part of, which you also are. So it goes back to what I said at the beginning. Books are unnecessary when you begin to draw from your own sense of connection to all that is. Because this book is just a reflection of someone's ability to draw from that. If you can do it, you don't need books. If you know yourself, you know all books that could be written or have been written, will be written.
That's the concept, the spirit man knows all things. And if you really believe that you could do what Jesus did, what book did he have? I mean, it's been shown to us, regardless of the religion, the ones who were the founders, for lack of a better term, were always the ones who did it without books. I mean, Muhammad couldn't even read, so he had to do it without books. So.
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I was just trying to think, where is it written that Jesus could read? He wrote one symbol in the sand.
It's in the Bible. When you read the scrolls in the temple.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's part of what Christianity is. There's sort of 4 books in the book that we have been given. But there's more than a dozen concerning the life of the man called Jesus.
Right.
And the reason that you are not allowed to read them is because they don't conform with what the Catholic Church wants people to think in order to maintain a certain degree of control over them. Yeah. If you call yourself a Christian anywhere in the world, doesn't really matter. You fall under the authority and purview of the Catholic Church. You read the book they gave you, actually with fewer books in it, because there's more books in the Catholic Bible, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yes.
So you read even less than they read, which is why even the Catholics call some people call themselves Christian here in this country crazy. Those creationists say we were riding dinosaurs and stuff like that. Even the Catholics think that's crazy. Anyway, so all of the so-called world religions were based on the spiritual principles of conscious awareness and spirit and your direct interface with reality and its source. The remnants of these original impulses of light and the original circles that formed around these impulses of light can be seen in all of these so-called world religions today. All of these groups that contain traces of the original pulse of light that inspired the creation of this religion over time, all of these groups are oppressed by the majority of the so-called religion, the so-called official religion. Here's what I mean. These aren't the only ones, but for example, in Islam, you had the Sufi tradition. In Judaism, you had the study of Kabbalah. In Buddhism, those traditions coming from Tibet and parts of southern China around thereabouts, but especially those traditions coming out of Tibet. So all of these minority groups within the religion as a whole are not considered by that whole to be legitimate, or at least they are marginalized in some way. And I use that to illustrate the sort of history of this development of this thing called religion, because wherever you have the initial impulse of light, wherever you have the individual or group of individuals teaching, over time and distance, you have the decline of the consciousness of those people around them. And it sort of ripples outwards like a pond. The further you go in time and distance, the greater the decline in general.
It's like the understanding calcifies.
Yes, very much so. And in that sort of consciousness vacuum, you have the rise of, if there was somebody who could graph it, it would be one-to-one. It would be, as spirituality goes down, religion goes up.
As spirituality,
As spirituality declines, religion ascends. For reasons that I've mentioned and will mention, and we'll get into. When the people's own ability to draw from their own spirit becomes confused or blocked, or otherwise they are distracted from it, something else steps in to fill that vacuum. It is partly our own creation, it is partly the creation of people who want to take advantage of that vacuum. But does that make sense? So,
I need another example of what you're talking about.
in the Sufi tradition, in Islam, the Sufi tradition is the oldest part of Islamic tradition. And my personal theory is that that existed before anything calling itself Islam or Muhammad even showed up. And my personal theory is that Muhammad basically came out of that. But that's not something that you will ever hear mentioned in sort of the mainstream of what Islam is today. But the Sufi tradition is it's not concerned with politics. It's not concerned with any of those things we might associate with Islam conventionally. It is concerned with knowing oneself and the sort of ritual practices surrounding shifting your own consciousness and increasing your ability to draw from your own connection to Allah. So has anyone heard of the whirling dervishes? They are part of, I believe, the Sufi tradition. And they are, it's basically just, it's pretty much all men for reasons we'll get into, but people who employ a certain ritualistic practice in order to make changes in their own consciousness and awareness. And what they do is they just spin. They dance for a long time. And in the process of dancing, their goal is to make that shift in their own awareness and become more aware of their connection and more precise in their ability to draw from their own spirit. And that's why across the world, wherever you have native spiritual practices, you have rituals that are designed to shift consciousness. That is the more esoteric reason of why all of those things are attempted to be destroyed when religion encounters them. Because when religion sees spirituality, it tries to kill it because of what religion is. But that's just an example. Does that help?
Yeah, that's better.
In Christianity, we have the same thing. But in Christianity, it is more a mixture of many different esoteric traditions and principles. So the more mystic or spiritual component of Christianity draws from a lot more many sources. One of the reasons I believe that the sort of religious de-evolution of this thing called Christianity and why it resulted in something so dark and chaotic is because, yep.
Are you streaming live?
No, I'm just recording that.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Because I know you went out. That's all.
Okay. One of the reasons I think that the sort of religious de-evolution of the spiritual source that eventually became Christianity, one of the reasons I think it became so dark and destructive is because what it was one of the greatest sources of light that has ever existed in the, quote, modern world. So this is not to minimize the light that is present in a Muslim and Buddhist or any other tradition. But for example, it is the reason that Jesus was quoted more often in the Quran than Muhammad was. And Jesus is the most talked about prophet in the Quran. So don't be confused by that. The religion that we see as Christianity today, I'm not saying Christianity is the greatest source of light, I'm saying the religion that we call Christianity today has pretty much nothing to do with the true origin and spiritual impulse of light that it is sort of based off of. The truth that forms the center of the lie that Christianity is very, very deep, and it has nothing to do with what it looks like today. We were just saying all good lies have some seed of truth. The seed of truth that forms what this thing called Christianity is today, it's still there, but very tightly controlled in a place like the Vatican or something like that, in terms of what they know about spirituality and where all this is actually coming from. The man Yeshua and the woman Miriam, so Jesus and Mary, were here to do something very different from what this thing called Christianity says they were. In fact, they don't talk about Miriam or Mary at all. And I know we talked about that in here. That's because when you introduce the feminine back into the equation, that's when spirituality begins to be reintroduced, and religion cannot have that.
Are you talking about Mary of Magdalene?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you going to go into why that happens?
Yeah. So something that I think is very, very relevant and indicative of the way we are all connected is that Miriam, or Mary, as in Mary Magdalene, the name Mary means something akin to sea of bitterness. And if you go over to the Hindu or the Buddhist tradition, the name Maya is very much connected and related to the name Mary. Maya, in the Buddhist or the Hindu tradition, means illusion, or sea of illusion. So what you have is two different religions that still contain the same spiritual source, if that makes sense. And so that's why those names are very similar. The spiritual role that Mary played is very similar to the role that Maya played in the Hindu or the Buddhist tradition over in the East.
So can you connect the bitterness part with the illusion part?
Yes. And also, I should say that in Buddhism, there never is explicitly stated that there is a feminine counterpart. But I'm 1,000% sure there was. Just as is in the Christian tradition, they suppressed and destroyed all mention of Mary and the contributions that women made, in fact, the exactly equal contribution that Yeshua's feminine counterpart made. That was destroyed and suppressed because of religion, what it wanted to be. But in terms of the connection between sea of bitterness and illusion, this physical experience, this whole illusion that we exist within, is what we are seeking to transform. We are seeking to transform ourselves in it and it because of ourselves. Everything that we experience as this physical material environment is part of what needs and seeks redemption. Meaning it seeks to be returned to its source from whence it came and has forgotten about and become confused and distracted and lost from. So Mary, the sea of bitterness, is in part that recognition that everything that has become lost or corrupt about this physical experience needs to be transformed. So
could that be connected to the bitterness of feminine energy because of what was happening, what happened to females?
Can you speak up a little bit, please?
Huh?
Can you speak up a little bit, please?
Oh, could that possibly be connected to what took place with females? How the lady with Jesus came for her daughter, on behalf of her daughter. It says that he spoke not a word to her, he ignored her, and then eventually spoke to her. Could that possibly be the bitterness that's in the heart of the female for being rejected? And that bitterness remains there until reconciliation is reached and religion's purpose is to keep at least a portion of their life available until someone desires to stand in the gap and find out what their life really is.
Very much so. Is everyone?
So part of the illusion then is not understanding and recognizing that there's a role for the feminine as well as the masculine energy. And then the bitterness has to do with that non-recognition of the role of the feminine energy.
I mean, remember Thomas?
In a sense.
Peter was angry because Jesus kissed her on the lips often, or talked to her aside from the rest of the disciples. That kind of anger generated there. And after the ascension, what did Mary have to do? She had to leave Jerusalem. She had to leave and go to what? France. Why? For fear of her unborn child being persecuted is not destroyed. So that bitterness is what I'm referencing.
So does that make? So the same spiritual impulse that is present at the source of the origin of this religion called Christianity is present at the source of the origin of the religion of Hinduism or Buddhism. And it's the recognition that this experience is something that needs to be transformed.
Yes, indeed.
And the feminine, it's impossible to do it without the recognition of the feminine, which we talked about in here a bunch. But that's why what religion is and what it became wants to push that out.
Yes, I think that when Nelson said, yes, it does need to be redeemed, it sparks something. That's the reason relationships fail, because of male dominance. And it creates bitterness in the female because it's as though you're talking at her instead of to her. She has no say. She's manipulated, doing what you want her to do, those kinds of things. And when we began to recognize this and rectify it, that's when the balance begins to take place. You see, I don't want to think for a moment that, as Nick is talking about Mary, that is not referencing everything that's happening at this very moment with relationships in relationship to rather the representatives of male energy and feminine energy.
Right. Because it's not about these two people.
No.
So, just as when you move further away from a source of physical light, the further away you get, the dimmer it grows and the more difficult it is to see. Over the course of spiritual distance, which is time, as well as actual physical distance as people move across the world, more blockages were encountered, more confusion was introduced into people's ability to draw from that source of light that they were connected to, and more opportunities to step into the vacuum and more opportunities to step into the spiritual vacuum that was created as a result of people's difficulty to connect with that source of light. Those vacuums were created and taken advantage of. I'll say that again, I think as spirituality declined, as people's ability to draw from that source of light grew dimmer, or grew less intuitive and less strong, opportunities to take advantage of the ignorance were taken advantage of. So in terms of the development of religion, you have, in the case of Christianity, something like the Romans recognizing the opportunity to use that to build their empire, which was quickly becoming, around the time of Jesus' death, the Roman Empire was in transition from one of physical to one of religious and spiritual.
So when I'm moving from one reality and I'm trying to connect with the source, and there's a vacuum that's created because everything that I believed, or a lot of what I believed, crashes and burns for whatever reason, because it was my conception of what Christianity was. And while I am making the attempt to draw from myself and the source, do I control, to what extent do I control what goes in that vacuum? You know what I'm asking?
Yeah, your intention controls what fills that vacuum. But that's in terms of our spiritual development as we as individuals sort of break from our religious programming.
Right.
In terms of the history of the development of religion, that same thing happens. But that vacuum is what I'm referring to when people as a collective lose their spiritual leader. Then the vacuum is filled by people wanting to assume the position of leader and pervert or divert it for their own purposes. And so, yes. And so when you have something like the Romans seeing the opportunity that Christianity, quote unquote, which wasn't called that then, of course, seeing the opportunity that it presented to step in, fill that vacuum, and divert that energy in the direction that they wanted it to go, that's what they did. And then you have the Holy Roman Empire and then the Catholic Church, which is the religiousification of the Roman Empire. Yeah.
The Romans were successful because they saw the Catholic Church becoming stronger, and that's why the joint forces happened. But the leadership, in order to get people to buy into it, had to change their intention. The intention was not a search for spirituality or religion. The intention was survival. Because if you didn't convert, you died. So with the intention being survival, you bought into everything you were taught. And you encourage your offspring to do the same thing for the purpose of survival. And after 2 generations, everything becomes real, as opposed to just for the sake of survival. And that's what made this type of Christianity real, and still makes it real. That's the origin. That's the genesis of it.
Does that make sense? So if you're under the threat of death, you'll say, "Oh yeah, I believe that," just to say it, so you don't get
You
killed.
get real pragmatic under the threat of death.
Yep.
Yeah.
And after a while, you believe it. Your children believe it, or their children believe it.
Yeah.
And then the fact that the space has been taken advantage of and subverted, leading to the increase and acceleration of the development of this thing called the Catholic Church and the Christian religion as a whole, as a political instrument as opposed to source of light and spiritual awareness and knowledge. So when something steps in to that sort of vacuum and declares itself the source of your salvation, it begins to remove all those things that oppose it. Now, in terms of spirituality, when the extremely out of balance masculinity that forms the foundation for the Christian church begins to gain the power and influence that it sought, it begins to suppress all mention of the feminine and all contribution of the feminine.
You're talking about religion, but it sounds just like you're talking about not only religion, but what our president is did. He's the savior, and so he comes in and he begins to dismantle all of those, attempts to dismantle everything that's been built, and puts his own folk in place to support whatever his desires are. So it works not only for religion and versus Christianity, it works for whatever is going on in this realm.
All things that play out in this realm are reflections of things that are happening in others.
And based on that, Bible, our purpose is to make sure that the same thing that happened with the genesis of Catholicism doesn't happen now. That people are more focused on survival than they are on knowing who they are. That desire being put in the macro changes things more so than it did then. The whole danger of it is hidden in Catholicism by virtue of Catholic meaning universal. So when you talk about the Catholic Church, you talk about something that calls itself a universal church, which is foreign to the scriptures. Universal is foreign, so is church. Both of which are foreign to the scriptures. So now it is hearing from heaven as with Michael. I'm sorry, with Malachi, is there a word from heaven, which is there a word of enlightenment for humanity? And there comes John, then there comes Jesus. Now, the question is there a word of enlightenment for humanity because of what's being unraveled? Prior to it being unraveled, everything that mankind, especially in this society, felt that it needed was wrapped up in what they could earn, as opposed to who they are. So now, it's up to us to make sure that there's a search for who.
It would seem then that if we're back at the stage of, and I'm just talking we, not we, at the stage of survival, which implies a basic selfishness, then what's going to stand in the gap are people who don't have that fear of not being in this plane in the physical.
Absolutely.
And so, we're uncomfortable with death. It limits the extent to which we can advocate for enlightenment. Because enlightenment is bigger than death. It's bigger than this physical. So, I don't know if that resonates or not, but for people who are at the stage where their very survival in this realm is their key, is the thing that drives them. It's difficult for them to see or to apprehend or to pursue enlightenment if that's all they see in front of them. How, what's in it for me kind of thing. So that puts a bigger burden, well, not a bigger burden, but it just says that for those who are beyond that point, you got to stay the course because you may be all that people have.
We are on the brink of another extinction of mankind. That's what we are. It's just that simple. Just like all other types of men became extinct and then there another was raised up, we're on the brink of extinction.
You want the nuclear?
No. I'm talking about on the brink of extinction by virtue of the laws that we disobey. The laws of nature are not a suggestion. They are not a suggestion at all. They are really laws. And you can't change them with a vote.
Jump off the building.
Yeah. So
And
that's what I'm talking about on the brink of extinction.
yeah, and that's going what she said on part of that. Keeping people in a survival mind state is beneficial to what religion is and the people who benefit from it. That's why these zealots in Congress do not want universal health care for everybody in this country. There are people who refuse to allow that to happen because that, whether they are aware of it or not, that reduces the stress level of people. And that just gets into how this metaphysical drama we are all participating in plays out in the physical. There is no such thing as politics. Politics is a more external extension of spirit and what is happening spiritually. Yeah, that's why the push to get universal health care is a response from people to get, it's like the same push to leave your religious setting and understand something for yourself. It's the removal of the limiting factors, and one of the biggest ones being what you think you can do because you think you're going to get sick and have no money because you have to pay for it.
Paul Ryan telling you that you're going to have to pay for sick people and old people. That's what he said. So what is he saying? I'm a Christian, but I'm not going to take care of the sick and the old. You see what I'm talking about? I was sick and you visited me now. You comfort me now.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it's being said. It's all in your face. But we're so caught up on daily survival, mankind, so caught up on daily survival, we doesn't see it. And when you think about it, universal health care changes everything. That's one of the major things that you cannot privatize and expect it to be successful. Healthcare. It has to be a socialist event or system. Because you can't make money if people are sick and old. So it has to be a public thing. And that's what the fight is there. Ayn Rand is Paul Ryan's idol. And Ayn Rand was against everything, including Social Security. He ended up dying on Social Security.
Well, it's like this, I don't know what to call it, but the sense that we're just individuals and we shouldn't have to pay for anyone else
Yes.
besides our own individual needs.
Selfishness.
And it's grown to the point where it's ludicrous. I don't remember which of our members of the General Assembly gave a speech on the floor this week or last week about how we are robbing taxpayers to pay for roads. I don't understand that. How is that robbery if you have a car? How many taxpayers don't have cars? And I know he's not talking about them. He's not complaining on their behalf.
Pure insanity. Yeah.
But like that makes no sense.
But the whole system makes no sense. That's the issue. We are no longer in a vacuum where things seem to make sense. We are in a world of reality and seeing exactly what's been done over the course of time. That's why I say and believe that we're on the brink of extinction. If we don't stay the course, because everything is falling apart. People are giving up hope for anything. If you think that doesn't make sense, how does it make sense to have a gun range in a bar?
What?
Yes,
Where is this?
it's in Texas. If you think that doesn't make
That
sense,
part makes sense.
how
He
does
said
it-
Texas.
how does it make sense
It was Texas or
to have
Florida.
anyone who buys a gun can carry it without any training? If you own it, you can carry it. How does that make sense? So nothing,
Yeah.
nothing is making sense anymore. Why?
Do you,
It used to make sense, but now it doesn't,
Looks like it makes sense.
because we see more clearly.
and do you see all these attempts to introduce, to create situations that spark chaos?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yes.
That is what we are standing against.
Examples, Nick?
The South Carolina, you can carry a gun without, you can just go get a gun and just carry it. Everybody, guns for everybody.
Did we pass that?
They had-
I forget,
No,
but-
not yet. They had the first reading now.
Gun range in
They're
the
going to
bar.
Senate.
But the fact that that's even up for a vote is insane.
Kill everybody in the bar.
Carry one to church.
But the
The,
other thing with that is that we who are seeing it a little more clearly are saying, why can't they see this? Why can't they see this? You know, doesn't anybody see what's going on?
But don't nobody want to know the truth.
That's must be.
Because they can't handle it.
they can't handle the truth. That- You know what? That's okay.
Yeah.
There just needs to be one person.
Just one.
Just one.
So I guess I said that to say that we can't just get frustrated when we say that. Why can't they see this? Why can't we? That's even more opportunity to stay the course.
Yes.
Yeah, like,
Because we could easily get pulled away.
that's the danger in it.
Yeah.
And
Don't get wrapped up in one of the backhand people for being.
Because if they did see it, their response would be very different than yours.
Yes.
Giving up hope instead of seeing hope in the midst of it. Not believing that they're going to get through it when you're talking about, no, you're not going to get through it, you're going to grow through it. As a result, they don't see that. It's like people who lose all their money and start working. Some of them say, okay, and some say, bang. So it's just a matter of, I don't think that it was intended for everyone to recognize it any more than it was intended for your hands to do what your feet do. At some point, and for lack of a better term, the analogy, at some point, someone has to be the brain of this thing, the light of this thing, in order for the whole body to move in a different direction. Because the brain of this thing now is constantly shooting itself in the foot. But when you have someone standing in the gap, now that changes. Because the whole body can be guided in a different direction. Does that make sense?
I think it's interesting that more and more people can more and more quickly see that there is something being imposed onto us that none of us asked for. Like when they introduced that bill in Congress to allow internet service providers to sell your browser history. No one asked for that. You know who asked for that? The people who have money and like to tell politicians what to do for them. We didn't ask for that. But that is the same sort of concentration of darkness in politics that you see in something like the Catholic Church in the Vatican. Which is why we said when Donald Trump got elected, it was a good thing in a roundabout way, because when you try to consolidate power and sort of reveal all the plans that you have for people, it puts you in one position, and we all know where you are. So,
and that's why they didn't want him. They didn't want him to be president.
Yeah.
Because he was stupid enough to reveal everything.
He's not smart about his subject.
Yes, being the president is difficult. However, for people around me, it makes it a lot easier. You don't just say, I didn't know this was going to be this hard. It was easy in my other life. You know, that's the stupidity of it all. That's to bring in Dow Chemical and have them standing there with you as you remove all of these safeguards and regulations from insecticides. They've been done all along. Look what Monsanto did, but you didn't know anything about it. You don't know that if you get sick or die from genetically food that has been genetically altered by Monsanto, you can't sue them. But it's a law. But you didn't know it. Why? Because nobody talked about it. But Donald Trump talks about it. That's the difference. He has to show us these things.
He's our leader.
He's the voice of the creator. That's who he is.
So, of these so-called world religions, none of the people who were at the origin of these religions were responsible for founding these religions, with the possible exception of Muhammad.
Say that again.
None of the people who are said to have founded these religions did that, with the possible exception of Muhammad. Jesus did not create Christianity. Buddha did not create Buddhism. These things are what filled that vacuum after hundreds of years, after the initial impulse of light began to fade away. I know you want to talk. Go talk.
And Catholicism is getting back where it was. You remember the history of Catholicism when Muhammad reconciled with the Pope? That's what's happening right now. The Pope is going to Egypt for a reconciliation between Islam and Christianity, or Catholicism. So we're at that place.
Yeah, that was one of the things I didn't know if I wanted to say it or not, but yeah. Where did I put that in here?
I don't know.
I was gonna say that ISIL, those, I don't like calling them ISIS.
Yeah.
Those people who dress in black in the Middle East and seem like they want to kill everybody they work for the Catholicism. They work for that entity. Part of the reason I think they are allowed to exist is because you have to partly give something to be distracted by. You gotta give people something that will distract them. You need an enemy if you want to work your way into the system as completely as you want to without people noticing. And see, there are many layers to this game that is being played. But those things that are esoteric, those things that deal with the occult, are always at the center. Always. It then moves out to intelligence, it then moves out to politics, it then moves out to sort of conventional stuff going on in society. But in terms of the people attempting to guide our direction and manipulate it for their own benefit, it always goes back to the spiritual at its core. Which is why I say the people who, quote, founded these world religions, none of them founded these religions. All of them said that you don't have to look to another source of light in order to connect with your own spirit, because you are it. And it is within your own self that you need to look, not outside of you. All of them said it. But the religions that formed around the remnants of the light they represented, all of them say the exact opposite, which is what religion is.
Also, is a religion, the true meaning of religion is connecting.
That is the meaning of the word.
Yeah.
But think about,
The question is what you connect.
yes,
Legion.
where else have you seen that? The word legion.
When we talk about demons,
I know that's not exactly how it's spelled, but that's what the word is.
the darkness of God.
So what are you connecting to?
That's so appropriate. He says, when he said religion, I'm connected to, what is your name?
What are you? Are you asking me to believe all this stuff? But based on my ability to draw from my own spirit and know things for myself, what is this thing you are offering to me as it is weighed against the reality? So the spirituality will always tell you what that thing is, which is why that gets suppressed and pushed out of what religion is, especially in Christianity, more than all of them. Well, possibly the exception of Islam in general, but because Christianity as an institution is responsible for influencing what Islam has sort of become in the world, in the majority. But once again, the spiritual impulse for Islam is not what we see in the majority. It's just the same for Christianity. If you are looking anywhere other than your own self and your ability to draw from your own spirit in order to know anything about yourself, about this reality, if you're looking to any other source, that source had better be attempting to ignite something within you so that you become the teacher that surpasses it. So the teacher, the real teacher, is seeking to create more teachers better than him or herself, not get all this attention pointed at them. If not, if that teacher, if that preacher, prophet, is doing anything other than attempting to ignite within you the same spark that they perceive, then that thing you are looking to use the religious term, is a devil.
Belial is a harlot.
Is a deceiver. Nowhere is that as great as in Christianity, specifically Catholic Christianity. That thing is looking to selfishly profit off the energy that you produce. Physical energy, spiritual energy, all of it is an extension of the same food source for that thing that is seeking to gather your attention.
Which is why the Matrix resonated with so many different people.
Which is why the Matrix, is what it is. And that is whether you know it or not. So, all of the good people, of which the people there are the majority of the people who go to church, are just in church, and that's fine. But whether they know it or not, their attention is being used in a way that is detrimental to their spiritual being. So when we bring our spirituality to a place, like whatever typical church setting you may bring it to, and instead of it being fed and given kindling with which it needs to burn brighter, it gets diverted into pageantry and the same message you've heard every week for most of your life.
Thank you, Ms. Arthur.
Doesn't matter now.
He's coming at me.
Father Evelyn, apparently.
You have,
Sorry, Nick.
you have killed a
You
living,
probably didn't make it outside.
you have killed a living being in the house of
Yeah.
Of like,
you are.
Well, she's sitting to the other side.
Oh.
I
wish you was here when the mosquitoes show
feel that too.
You think your job's done? You just gonna leave it
So what you just said,
It's a
Ben,
warning to the others.
Wait, was I finished saying it? Yeah, go
what you
ahead.
just said is that religion as we know it now is a big distraction.
Yes,
It seeks to distract us from knowing ourselves,
correct.
our truth.
And it's not just a distraction in the sense that, oh, we should be paying attention to something else. It is profiting off of the attention that we pay it. So it's not just some passive thing that is just something we happen to be looking at. It is drawing off of the energy that we give it. And it, the proverbial they, is, I want to get into that at some point. I don't know if I'll do it within this setting, because this physical experience that we are participating in is nested within metaphysical hierarchies of reality. And so this phenomenon that we look at and see as religion is connected to entities that are not physical. Just as we are connected to our own self, there are other things in this metaphysical hierarchy that profit off of the focus of our attention. And there are certain aspects of this phenomenon called religion that are aware of that. So when I say these things called religions sort of rise up and fill the spiritual vacuum that is created, it's because there are spiritual forces, entities, or whatever that are the source of that drive to create that religion.
As you described that, the thing that came into my thoughts were a spiritual food chain, just like a natural food chain.
Yeah.
Where those energies are, the energy is what feeds, and it depends on the intent of that energy is what gets fed.
Yes. And you can think of it just like we see physically. Some animals eat other animals, including us. Spiritually, it's the same thing. There are spiritual animals, quote unquote, that are looking to eat. And we have the ability to feed them or not. Now, it's more like, I don't want to, the power as it always has been and always will be remains with you. I don't want to put any sort of negative emotion out there. No. Nothing's going to eat you. Maybe it can, but you cannot die. The only thing that the proverbial it, including the religion, politics, and whatever can do is divert your attention through the agency of things like creating chaos in society by keeping people in a survival mind state, preventing things like universal health care from being the standard. Because that promotes a certain type of consciousness. It promotes a certain low vibration. Everybody's always afraid, always 2 steps away from being in a panic. That is beneficial if you want to maintain control over a group of people. And that's part of what religion does, definitely with the Catholic Church and its promotion of the idea that you would get sent to hell when you died. Because that doesn't exist
All right.
in this book. Hell does not exist in this book. Nowhere. Including the mentions in the New Testament of the literal word hell. First of all, that is the English European connotation associated with that. In the Greek, it's Hades, if that. And Hades is not nearly as bad as the Catholic Church said it is bad.
Actually, in Greek, it is place of paradise as it is in Aramaic. It talks about a place of repose.
So-
Repose?
Yes.
That sounds more inviting.
Is it not? So, which is not to say that there are not negative experiences to be had in other realms.
Around that, too.
Which is not to say that there are unpleasant things to be experienced in other realms. There are, but the nature of that experience is determined by you, not anything poking you with a stick or whatever. So, and that's
What's up with that anyway, poking you with the thing?
that- what-
It's a staff, you the sheep.
Oh.
yeah, you get poked with a sharp stick for all eternity or whatever.
It's a staff with no compassion. Is that what
Yeah,
it is?
that's it.
No, it's just a zillion things.
Well, let me say this: the idea, that is one of the most destructive and as far from the reality of this reality as you can possibly get ideas that is introduced to us in order to keep us enslaved to a particular mindset. The idea that you will go to hell if you die and you don't do what we say you should do. And it is difficult to divorce yourself from that. Even me, I was like, oh, okay, I'm 90%, but like 10% of me. Well, previously, not now.
Right, we were the same
When
way.
I was learning this,
Now, we're going.
10% of me was like, maybe I'm about to go to
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
It is difficult to extract that from yourself.
Nick, when you were talking earlier about religious, I guess the thoughts,
We'll
and
take a break
religious
soon.
mindset. Oh.
Sorry, no, we'll take a break soon. Go ahead.
The religious mindset, and we talked a little bit about politics, I think, and some other things. But I'm also wondering about a lesson that Barbara taught. Gosh, it's got to be a few years now. On the thoughts that come about what you should do. And I guess it comes from the pressure of religion and culture, and it's just these little niggling thoughts of how you should behave or what you should be thinking. And it's not necessarily reality driven. Does that make sense?
Yes. And I think that is culturally determined. It's whatever outside influence has told you what is good, and therefore you're thinking to yourself, this is what I have to do.
Yeah, almost like morality apart from your inner compass.
Yep.
What you could have, should have. Yes.
Yeah.
Religion is a manipulation of your culture.
Yeah.
That's what it does. It manipulates your culture. That's why it's different in different parts of the world. That's the culture.
Yeah. So what you should do, you know already. In fact, those sort of cultural, what am I say? The spectrum of culture that sort of is layered on top of our innate knowledge of what is right and what is wrong makes it more difficult to perceive what is right and what is wrong. And not saying culture is a bad thing, of course. I'm saying that you know what is right and wrong when you know your own self. And it is not a list of things that you internally go down and check off. Okay, this is good, that's bad, that's You, in interface with your own spirit, in interface with all that is, have the ability to be aware of what constitutes harmony and balance in that particular circumstance. And as we learn to hear more clearly that impulse within us that is us, we will know what to do in all and every situation. Now, if you don't know, if you're confused and distracted like we all are, the direction of your intent is what determines what you will learn and create in that situation. You don't know, if you don't know intellectually what to do, if you don't feel like you can hear the clear message of what to do, then what do you intend to do? If your intention is selfish, it's probably going to create something negative. If your intention is to grow and learn and unselfish, something positive that will reconnect you with your own spirit will likely occur as a result, even if it doesn't make you comfortable at the time. So,
No.
ah,
I got 85 cans of worms to open up. No.
yep. So,
No, it's just,
here's an example that happens all the time. If you're at work and someone really gets on your nerves, almost out of nowhere, you automatically don't like them, guarantee you 100% that person is the person you need to get to know. And that's just the way it goes.
You
And
would
that is,
say that.
and that is, and that is what you will least want to do in that situation, because that is making you uncomfortable. Oh, we can take a break soon. But examine your own intention in that situation. Is it to be petty, which is selfish? Is it to withdraw and avoid that situation, which is not necessarily a good thing? Or is it to maintain some semblance of peace and balance and engage that situation? There's no one thing I can say. Rather, just be aware of yourself to the best of your ability. And just don't intentionally seek to cause harm in anything or anyone. So what I just said was, if you're in that situation and you don't know how to act, especially in the case where you're at work and someone's getting on your nerves, you don't have to know what to do, but just be aware of yourself in that situation. The nature of your own intention will determine what happens.
Just be kind.
Yeah, just be kind. Don't seek to antagonize.
Always.
Well, no, see, that's what religion do. It antagonize it. It try to control. So I know where I am. I hear it, but then I don't hear it. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, there are times when I don't feel, sometimes you don't feel like hearing that crap, that's being put out there.
Yeah.
But you can always get away from your desk or whatever and go.
Yeah.
You know what I
get
mean?
up and walk out of church.
No, I'm talking about work.
Yeah.
I know.
But yeah,
But, it's funny, like I said, so many things running through here, but I can't quite come down to the quintessential core dot. But it seems like 90% of what we're saying, what's running through my head is social media. We're not talking about religion. It's way past religion. In fact, I think religion got co-opted by all this sort of, I suppose you could,
Social media is a new religion.
Yeah.
but it comes out of a certain kind of corporate capital kind of model, which I think is even the ruination of some of the positive aspects of capitalism and things. It's just all this, but just think about it. The way people seem to behave because of those things. I mean, that thing is 10 times more powerful than walking around with a Bible in your hand, seems to me. And people are quoting that more often than opening that and looking in there.
But it's religion.
Well, but I'm saying you can't even call things religions anymore. It's also.
Well, what I want to impress is the word religion. That's just the word that we.
It's what you connect it to.
Yeah.
And you connect it to social media.
It is.
When you think of that, you have this notion of there being a certain energy that's sacrosanct. Oh, look at all the words.
Yes.
And it's just all so pulled into everything and everything into it now that what's not a religion,
Yeah.
right?
everything is. The corporate religion created the cell phone. And corporate religion created Facebook. And there are people who worship Facebook. They can't stay off it.
You're facing
They
all
are
the
so,
time.
they're more addicted to Facebook than the crackhead is to crack.
Yeah.
You see, it's the religion, because you submitted to it and you worship it. I mean, what's the greatest fear when someone transitions? That somebody go put it on Facebook before the rest of the family knows. You know, because everything is on Facebook. I went to the bathroom a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
On Facebook, yeah. Or Instagram.
Yeah, you're right.
Isn't Twitter's even faster than that, isn't it? I mean, it's getting,
Why you had to check your phone?
Checking Facebook because I got. No, I'm gonna tell them we're gonna take a break in a second. But if anybody's paying attention to that, so but look at Facebook is a certain size. Then you have Twitter, which is smaller bite sizes. Wherever you see the increasing granularity of the rule set, if you get what I'm saying, you have the increase in complication, the decrease in quality, the increase in quantity, the decrease in quality of whatever. In terms of religious settings like Catholicism, in the beginning you had the 10 Commandments, now you have a rule for every single thing that you could possibly think of. You could do. Some monk somewhere has wrote it down and it's part of Catholic whatever. Wherever you have the increase of rules and laws, can you see the attempt to fill the vacuum with the increased amount of stuff?
Which
this is
which
something
then
that-
consequently enslaves you in a sense.
Yes, because now you have this maze of things you have to work with in order to arrive at even the most basic, correct thing to do in any situation.
this seems to be, I think science has said this for decades, systems just inherently follow a track becomes increasingly complex. They just constantly multiply, they constantly build that pyramid with broader and broader base until
But don't limitations breed creativity?
Say again.
There's a thing that like artists and designers say, limitations breed creativity. Because if I tell you, build me a house, then the first thing you're gonna ask is, how many rooms do you want? That's a limitation. How many bathrooms do you want? It's another limitation.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it's like you have a framework to work in, but then it's got 6 rooms, but what if we divide one of these rooms, what if we make the kitchen like with an island that sort of bleeds into a breakfast nook? It's all technically one room, but I worked within this limitation to make something different that you wouldn't expect.
Yes.
So
That is, so that the limitation you're talking about, that is the sort of natural law that forms the structure upon which you can then creatively iterate. So if the limitations increase to the point where they're telling you exactly what to do everywhere, there's no creativity. If there's no structure and there's no limitation, then it's totally open and you don't know where to start even. So in terms of spirituality, your own connection to spirit informs you of what to do in a given situation. But the religious other end of the spectrum is the massive increase in rules and regulations, quote unquote, that you have to follow that effectively paralyzes your creativity, aka your spirituality.
well, I mean, aren't you kind of saying, yeah, and you're back to necessity is the mother of invention and all that sort of thing, but you need a space. I was just reading something about the importance of leisure and how you really, if you don't have culture, if you don't have a respect for leisure. And so all we've been talking about is that really disappearing. So everything is just adding on more to more to more to more to more until somebody breaks through and says, let's just do this a whole different way. But that's,
Well, we were just talking about that viral thing that the lady wrote where she said she's not going to let her child do homework anymore.
homework anymore.
That's exactly what
Child
that
do
is.
what?
She's
Homework.
not going to let her daughter do homework anymore. But she said her daughter was like waking up with panic attacks talking about school. She's in like the 4th grade. And the mother was like, no, that's not. That is the recognition that that is totally crazy, and the break from that massive rule set is the reawakening of your spiritual judgment of a situation, based upon your ability to know what represents harmony and balance within that situation.
Well, but now what you need is for her, what she wrote, to resonate with enough people to create a sort of tipping
Right.
point where parents just say screw it, and the administration say, well, we can't flunk everybody, we've got to redesign this curriculum.
Well, they already say that, they don't talk anybody.
Well, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I do know what you mean.
Because they're-
Yeah.
Yeah, so they just dilute it down to nothingness versus
And-
there is a whole other way for people to learn.
But see, that,
But anyway.
and that's in the exoteric, that's in the natural.
Yeah.
What we fail to realize is that we also have limitations in the esoteric, in the spiritual. We have to work within the framework of the greater, which is us.
Which is natural law,
Yeah.
capital L.
You have to work in their framework. That's where even with the example that Phil gave, that started in the other world. A dream became reality. You see what I'm talking about?
Yep.
Everything starts in the spiritual before it's manifested in the natural. Even when we were talking about this is how I want to do the kitchen, there are some people who can't see that until it's done. Because they can't see beyond what their eyes see. And we call it a visual. I can't see that in my head. I can't picture that. The idea of the homework thing, right? That's within limitation that men have created, right? That's within limitations that men have created, but they're not within the limitation that we have created as creators. Let me say this. They probably, somebody deserves to hear everybody keep doing this. When you calm down, they'll stop. So,
One of mine's out there.
but you understand the limitations of what I speak. Because when we cannot, if we explain, if we confuse rather the natural from the spiritual, then we have made a grave error. Because what we have done is embrace the distractions. We have made a grave error. When it says, and thou shalt not make any graven images of that which is in heaven, it's not talking about what they see it is. It's talking about do not try to reproduce in likeness. Let it be what it is. That's all it's talking about.
What does it look like, though, mistaking the natural for the spiritual? What does it look like, mistaking the natural for the spiritual?
We think that shouting is a spiritual event.
What?
Shouting. We think that baptism, water baptism, is a spiritual event. Those are things that we mistake. We think intellect is a spiritual exercise, when it really isn't. So, see, we talk about human wisdom, right? There's no such thing as human wisdom. There's only one wisdom. And that's enlightened wisdom from the Creator. We mistake intellect for wisdom.
And so all of our problems extend from there.
Yeah.
Let's take a break.
Okay.
Everybody listen on the phone. We're going to take a break. We will, what's good? 1 o'clock.
How long?
1 o'clock.
Until 1 p.m. Eastern Standard
1
Time.
p.m. Okay. All right.
Or
Bye.
let's do 1:15.
Now,
1:15 p.m. everybody. Sorry if you're still on the phone. I'll put it on Facebook too. Anyway,
Leave
All right.
the sign up in front of the camera.
We don't wanna sound like the traditional church